is Decoded, your trusted source for everything coding related. I'm your host, Jack Walker, and today we're delving into a topic that's essential for professionals in the coatings industry: performance testing. Performance testing for coatings is more than just a checklist. It's a comprehensive evaluation of key properties like adhesion, durability, and resistance. These tests ensure that coatings meet the highest standards of performance and reliability in real-world applications. But why does performance testing matter so much? It's about ensuring that coatings can withstand the harshest environments and provide long-lasting protection for various assets. Think of it as the quality assurance process that guarantees coatings deliver on their promises. Industry-wide testing standards, such as those set by ASTM, play a crucial role in ensuring consistency and reliability across different testing methods and laboratories. These standards are the backbone of our testing practices, ensuring that coatings perform as expected in diverse conditions. In today's episode, we will explore why performance testing is a cornerstone of the coatings industry, how it helps us make informed decisions about coating selection and application, and the role of case histories in validating testing results. Join us as we unravel the complexities of performance testing in coatings and discover why it's a fundamental aspect of ensuring quality, durability, and performance in our industry. All right, welcome to Coatings Decoded. I'm Jack Walker, and I'm new to Coatings Decoded, so just a little background on me. I am a technical marketing manager here with Tnemic. I've been in the industry for a little bit over 20 years. I've carried a NACE CIP Level 3 designation, and I think that's good. So what I want to do is I want to bring in Brian Cheshire, who's our Water and Wastewater Director of Sales. Brian, how's it going today?
Doing great, Jack, and thank you for having me. And I don't know if you feel this way, but I have this weird feeling of deja vu, like you and I have done this before somewhere.
Yes, we have. So what we really wanted to get into is performance testing today. There's been a little bit of a controversy in the industry lately about performance testing. And so we thought it'd be a good idea to sit down and have a little conversation about why it's so crucial. So I think before we can get into why it's so crucial, we really need to talk about what is performance testing. So Brian, we were talking about this, and we found a really good definition from a third-party testing lab. Why don't you give us what that is?
Yeah, sure thing, Jack. So Intertech, who is a company who performs performance testing, had a great definition where they lay this out, that they define performance testing as the process of evaluating a product's ability to perform its intended functions under specific conditions. So if you look at that, there's a little bit to unpack there. When you do performance testing, whatever said product is, you're trying to see, is it going to hold up in the service environment in which it's intended? And is it going to give you the product qualities that you need? I'll use a few examples here. So in my role at Tnemic Company, I'm the Director of Sales for Water and Wastewater.
Right.
That involves water tanks. That involves water wastewater treatment plants. We'll just use, for instance, the headworks at a wastewater treatment plant.
Sure.
You're looking at performance testing there. Do you really need UV protection necessarily, or color and gloss protection?
I think as long as you're going to be in that brown color, you're fine.
Very true. Very true.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't expect that in those situations we would really care about UV. It's about harsh chemical resistance.
Correct. And you're also in a very abrasive environment. So abrasion resistance, impact resistance, even things like SWOT testing, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. But once again, it goes back to that definition. Performance testing comes in many forms, many shapes and colors. But ultimately, it comes down to, will the product that you're looking at specifying perform in that service environment?
Correct. Yeah, those two keys are really big. Intended service, like you said, we're not going to take a UV coating and test it in immersion. The intended service part of this is a huge part of the performance testing decision. I kind of want to do an exercise as we go through. So we kind of talked about what performance testing is. I want to kind of give a real world example that we can kind of relate, do an analogy towards performance testing. And I'm a football fan. You're a pretty big football fan. You went to both of the football college universities.
I did stay at Alabama. I basically went through the buffet line of Southeastern Conference schools. So yeah, I've got my fill of football. And I would say very timely that we're talking about football, because literally just a few weekends ago, I think I wasted my entire weekend watching the draft.
Yeah. watching names get called out on television. It is one of the most exciting things we do all year for football. They measure and compare statistics about players.
Correct.
I kind of want to think of our performance testing for coatings similarly to how they look at the different measurables for the football players. You are using your performance testing as a way to compare individual coatings. That's the same thing that these football GMs and coaches do when they look at how tall is a player. I mean, that might be comparable to how thick is my coating.
Yeah.
You know, you have how strong is my player? Well, we test strength in coatings.
You know, a few years ago, now that you mentioned strength, there was a player actually from my alma mater, and at the combine, he literally could not lift the bar when they did the bench press. And so, needless to say, this guy did not project well into the NFL, and his NFL career maybe lasted about 5 minutes, I believe.
One of the things that we really want to talk about here is why we test, you know, and you know, it's one thing to talk about, you know, what it is, but why. And we test for comparison, but why else do we test?
Sticking on the football reference, quoting the great Jim Mora, testing?
Playoffs!
We have people within our space in the industry. I'm not going to name any names. Don't want to receive a cease and desist letter here, but we have people within the industry that would lead you to believe that testing does not matter.
There are. And it's really interesting, the hill that they are choosing to die on.
Correct.
One of the things that we really look at industry test for is it gives us an indication of performance, like we've talked about. So when we look at two coatings of similar generic types that are tested to a standard, we can now look at those results and compare the coating's performance in that test.
You can look at that a few different ways. You can look at relative comparisons. You can look at, will an epoxy versus a polyurethane versus a vinyl ester hold up better in this situation?
Sure.
So you can compare product technologies generically. Let's say, for instance, we decide that an epoxy is going to really do what I need it to do in the service environment. I can now look at several Tenemic epoxies. I can look at several other competitive epoxies and compare those relatively based on that set performance data that ASTM puts out.
It's almost like position groups in football, right? Like
Correct.
If we know we need an epoxy, maybe that's our offensive line or something like that. You know, we're going to look at those sets of measurables different than we would maybe look at what we need for a wide receiver. A wide receiver needs a little bit different of a skill set than an offensive lineman. So that goes back to that original definition from Intertech where we're saying, you know, suitable tests for the in use. But it's not just testing. The testing is like the first piece of the puzzle. It gets us faster than real world results. If we waited only on case histories, we would probably never get to use new technology. You know, new technology, if we had to prove everything out through case histories, you put it into service 20 years later, we're now evaluating. I mean, in 20 years is a short lifespan that engineers want today. I don't know about you, Brian, but every time I'm talking to an engineer, they're talking 30-year plus for life cycles.
Oh, exactly. And Jack, kind of going back to the football reference there, talking about performance testing, case histories. The thing that comes to mind, being a fan of football in the Southeast, Jamarcus Russell. I hate to pick on him here. And if you're listening, Jamarcus, I apologize for this analogy here. But
how amazing would it be if Jamarcus was listening to this?
That would be awesome. If you are, Jamarcus, I'd reach out to us, comment that you enjoyed this episode of Cuttings Decoded. But Jamarcus Russell tested off the charts at the combine. Unbelievable God-given talent. But you know what was missing was the case histories.
Yeah, he didn't have a whole lot of case histories. I mean, he had case histories at a certain level.
He did.
You know, so maybe he had done a mild environment in college football, but we didn't really know if he could handle the really severe environment. And it proved out that even though he could sit on his knees on the 20-yard line and throw a football through the uprights on the other side, he still didn't have what it takes.
Yeah.
So it is that perfect marriage as well. So while testing gives us an opportunity to look into the future and predict performance, those case histories validate that testing. And we have products that have been on the market now long enough that are coming back around And we are really seeing the translation from performance testing to real world.
And I always like to throw it out as well to an asset owner, to a specifier. There's a lot of options out there for you. And how do you ultimately decide what coating do I specify? And I'll kind of back up for a moment. There's been a statement out there in the industry that the use of performance testing is product marketing.
Yeah.
and I would say that gets me a little salty because I try to look at it through the lens of an owner's eye. Looking at all the available tools out there, what else is there if you take away performance testing? What else is there if you take away case histories? And I'll even make this or pose this question to you, Jack. Buying any kind of consumer product out there, I would imagine, don't you do your research before you buy a product more often than not?
Well, it's the Amazon environment. We go online, we buy things, we read the reviews from the other people. If you see a bad review, you don't do it. That coating that fails prematurely usually has a short cycle as a product.
Very true. Very true. So flipping that back to the analogy of choosing a coating, if you're a specifier or an owner, what else is there out there? And I would advocate very strongly that if you took away performance testing, you took away case histories, you're now subject to product marketing more so than you would be looking at it the other way.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, if I were in one of these webinars or such where this message is being conveyed, I would have a hard time not saying pot, you're black.
Yeah.
Because isn't it marketing and product positioning to say that the testing doesn't matter? I'm only doing that if my testing is inferior to my competitors. So I'm not going to try to murky the water about testing if I'm sitting on a quality product. One of the things that has been brought into question is the variability within tests. And ASTM International is there to write those standards in a way that the testing is performed almost identically across labs across the world.
And it's a good point to bring up too, Jack, that ASTM is an industry consensus. This involves manufacturers across the world. This involves industry professionals.
Right.
These are agreed upon test methods that whatever the product is has to go through, which by the way, I was looking at ASTM's website the other day, and it's amazing how many standards they have. I even found a standard for a vacuum cleaner and a broom. Go figure.
A broom.
A broom, yes, sir.
A broom has ASTM requirements in order to call itself a broom.
It does. In order for it to move dirt from one place to another,
yeah,
it has to pass a certain criteria of minimum standards.
Right. And so realistically, when we are questioning the variability of tests designed by ASTM, are we not indeed questioning the scientific method itself?
I would say yes.
So it's all about averages. We don't report one number. We report something that gets consistently found over and over again. Found by third-party labs, found by customers who do their own testing. That's why it is under attack. Because performance does matter. And it matters more to you when you don't have the best. And you murky the water because it's the only card you have in your poker game while you're sitting at the table.
Flip it back to football for a second. Let's talk wide receivers. Let's talk speed. 40-yard dash.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll throw in an analogy here that'll maybe question that variability a little bit. So I'll call out Tyreek Hill.
Okay.
Well-known wide receiver, fastest can be.
Fastest dolphin I've ever seen on land.
Very much so. Just slightly faster than Dan Marino.
Yeah, just a little bit.
So Tyreek Hill, let's throw him out there.
Okay.
Tyreek Hill, you put him on a grass field. Okay, runs the 40.
Yep.
Tyreek Hill, you put him on an artificial turf, runs the 40.
Yep.
Tyreek Hill, you put him on dirt, he runs the 40.
You put him inside, you put him outside. In a boat, on a moat, would it float?
And apparently we've now devolved into a Dr. Seuss book. But,
yeah.
But the point is, let me ask you this, Jack.
Yes.
Is Tyreek Hill fast?
Yes, Tyreek Hill is fast.
Thank you. He remains fast no matter what surface he's on.
Yeah. Coatings that are tested, no matter what lab they're tested in, that's usually what they are.
And if they perform well, even with a slight inherent variability, they still perform well.
And that variability in performance testing really looks insignificant when you compare it to the real world case histories, the whole puzzle.
And like you said, that's just one half of the piece of pie. And we talk a lot at Tenema Company. We do a lot with the water industry. So we talk a lot in the framework of asset management.
Right.
And when you start looking at life cycle costing, projection of service life, at its core, these are the tools you can use as an asset owner to really figure out what that accurate service life is going to be.
Yeah.
Like you said, you can't really have one without the other. But coupled together, performance testing and case histories gives you a very valuable tool. And I would argue much better than any other tool available in the market.
Correct. Yes, very much so. Let's kind of review it all here. Why does it ultimately matter? So first, not all coatings are created equal. That's not just from generic types. We obviously know that epoxies and urethanes and all those are different, that they're not created equal. However, within those individual generic types, urethane isn't necessarily a urethane. There is an attempt within our industry to commoditize what we do. And really, you have to ask your manufacturer for performance and see. And really open your eyes, especially if they are resistant. This extensive testing proves performance, and then the case history in service validates that testing. And lastly, it offers us a comparison. So we can look at products that are similar, look at their testing, see how they perform. And with that, I'm Jack. Brian, it was great to have you here today.
Thank you for having me, Jack. Great conversation.
That's all for Coatings Decoded. We'll see you next time.